I could have been twice as rich if I hadn't made one dumb mistake 50 years ago. No, it wasn't missing Apple or Google. It was buying something I didn't understand because I thought I was smarter than I was. That's how most people start investing. With overconfidence. With the fantasy that they'll outsmart everyone else. It's nonsense. The market doesn't care about your dreams or your clever little stock picks. It punishes arrogance faster than any casino. At least in a casino, you know the odds are against you. In the market, people convince themselves they're geniuses right before they lose their shirt. I grew up in the Great Depression. My family lost nearly everything. I learned early that money isn't magic. It disappears faster than it comes. If you want to keep it, you need rules. Most people don't like rules. They prefer stories about luck. They want shortcuts. They want some guru whispering a secret stock tip. That's all garbage. The truth is boring. If you want to succeed in investing, you follow a few simple principles, and you follow them for life. You don't jump around chasing fads. You don't borrow money to impress strangers. And you don't delude yourself into thinking you're the next Warren Buffett. I'm not here to sell you optimism. I'm here to tell you how to avoid stupidity. Because avoiding stupidity is more useful than chasing brilliance. It keeps you alive long enough to let compounding do its work. So here's the deal. If you're a beginner, stop looking for the hot stock. Forget about day trading. Forget about complicated charts and magical formulas. The path to wealth comes down to 3 rules. Simple, brutal, non-negotiable. 1, only invest in what you can understand. 2, don't spend money you don't have. 3, be patient, much more patient than you think. That's it. Sounds too simple? Good. That means you're already resisting the urge to complicate things. Human beings hate simplicity. We're addicted to action, noise, drama. But investing rewards the opposite. Calm, boring discipline. I'll walk you through each rule, not as theories, not as Wall Street nonsense, but as lessons learned the hard way, through mistakes, missed opportunities, and the occasional lucky break. Think of it this way. I didn't become rich because I was smarter than everyone. I became rich because I avoided being dumber than everyone. And if you're just starting out, that's the best goal you can have. Don't be the dumbest person in the market. We'll start with rule number 1, understanding what you own. Because the fastest way to go broke is to invest in something you don't understand while convincing yourself that you do. That's how I lost millions once. And if you're not careful, you'll lose too. The dumbest money I ever lost came from things I didn't understand. And it wasn't because the numbers were wrong. It was because I fooled myself into thinking I understood the game when I didn't. That's what most beginners do. They mistake familiarity for knowledge. They see a flashy company on the news and think, well, I've heard of it. That must mean it's a good investment. That's idiocy dressed up as logic. Owning a stock is owning a business. If you don't understand the business, you don't understand the stock. And if you don't understand the stock, you're gambling. Pure and simple. Let me give you an example. Back in the 1962nd, I dabbled in some promising tech stocks. They had great stories, brilliant engineers, a future that sounded like science fiction. Problem was I had no idea what the hell they actually did. I couldn't explain their business models to a 10-year-old. And if you can't explain it to a 10-year-old, you probably don't understand it yourself. Sure enough, I lost money. Not because the companies were scams, but because I didn't know enough to separate a good story from a good investment. Meanwhile, when Warren and I bought See's Candies, we knew exactly what we were buying. A box of chocolates that people loved enough to buy year after year. Nothing complicated, no mystery, just a simple business with pricing power. The lesson? It's far safer to invest in a boring business you understand than a glamorous one you don't. But human beings hate boring. They crave excitement. So they buy into the latest fad.com stocks, crypto coins, whatever Wall Street is pushing this decade. And then they wonder why their portfolio looks like a smoking crater. Here's the truth. You don't get extra points for difficulty. In fact, the more complicated the investment, the more likely it's going to blow up in your face. Buffett calls it the circle of competence. Stay inside your circle. Know where the edges are. And don't kid yourself into thinking the circle is bigger than it is. Most people can't resist stretching it. They say, well, I kind of get it. That's close enough. No, it isn't. Understanding is just a fancy way of saying you don't understand. And the market charges a heavy tuition fee for that kind of ignorance. If you really want to be a successful investor, you have to cultivate humility. You have to be willing to say, I don't know. That phrase is worth more than any hot stock tip. The irony is, if you restrict yourself only to what you truly understand, you'll probably pass on 90% of investments. And that's a good thing, because the discipline to say no is far more valuable than the eagerness to say yes. People ask me, Charlie, isn't that limiting? Doesn't that mean you'll miss opportunities? Of course it does. But missing an opportunity never bankrupted anyone. Chasing something you don't understand often does. I'd rather be slightly less rich than completely broke. So here's the punchline. If you can't explain in one sentence how a business makes money, you have no business owning it. Write that down. Tattoo it on your forehead if you need to, because it will save you from disasters you don't even see coming. Next, we'll talk about the second rule, why you should never spend money you don't have, and why debt is the quickest way to turn investing from wealth building into wealth destroying. The fastest way to ruin an investment career is simple: borrow money. Most people don't believe that until they've done it. Then they learn the hard way. I grew up in the Great Depression. Families weren't losing yachts, they were losing homes. Debt was the common thread. When the tide went out, anyone who borrowed too much was naked and bankrupt. That lesson stuck with me. If you don't owe money, no one can put you out of business. If you do owe money, you're playing Russian roulette with your future. Leverage is seductive. It promises more upside, faster returns, smart financial engineering. That's all marketing jargon. The reality is, leverage is just a way to amplify stupidity. If you're right, you get rich quicker. If you're wrong, you lose everything. And since most people are wrong more often than they think, you can guess how the story usually ends. Buffett and I never used much debt. People sometimes laugh at how old-fashioned we are. They say, but look at all the big firms using leverage. Look at hedge funds, private equity, Wall Street banks. Sure. And every 10 or 15 years, those geniuses blow themselves up. They're smart enough to build fortunes, but not disciplined enough to keep them. Debt is like heroin. It feels good on the way up, but eventually it kills you. I've seen it destroy promising businesses. I've seen it ruin talented people. And I've seen it turn an investor's sure thing into bankruptcy court. Let me tell you a simple truth. You don't need debt to get rich. You just need patience and discipline. Compounding works fine without leverage. It just requires time, something most people are too impatient to give it. That's the irony. The people who take on debt are usually trying to speed things up. They want results now. They can't stand the idea of waiting 20 or 30 years. But investing isn't about speed. It's about survival. If you stay in the game long enough, compounding does the heavy lifting for you. If you blow up with debt, you never get the chance. There's another angle to this: peace of mind. If you're investing with borrowed money, you're never at peace. You're always anxious. You're always checking the market like a gambler sweating over dice. That's no way to live. Wealth should buy you freedom, not ulcers. So here's my rule. If you don't have the money, don't invest. Save until you do. It sounds boring. It sounds slow, but it's the only way to guarantee you won't end up as roadkill in the next financial crash. People hate hearing this. They want shortcuts. They want to use other people's money. They think that's clever. It isn't. It's dumb. And the dumb get wiped out eventually. I don't care if it's margin loans, credit cards, or some newfangled crypto borrowing scheme. It's all the same poison. You can dress it up in fancy language, But debt doesn't change its nature. It makes you fragile. And fragile investors don't last. So if you're a beginner, here's your starting point. Build your base with cash you can afford to lose. No borrowed money. No le bits. Because the goal isn't just to make money. The goal is to stay solvent long enough to let compounding work its magic. We'll get to patience, next rule. And trust me, it's the hardest rule of all. Most people will never get rich from investing. Not because they're stupid, but because they're impatient. They want results in months, not decades. They want to double their money every year. And they think if they're not constantly doing something, they're failing. That's exactly why they fail. The stock market is designed to transfer wealth from the impatient to the patient. That's not philosophy. That's arithmetic. Compounding doesn't reward cleverness. It rewards time. You let your money sit, it multiplies. Slowly at first, then outrageously. But only if you wait long enough. The problem is, most people can't wait. They get bored. They get scared. They get greedy. So they buy high, sell low, repeat until broke. I've watched it my whole life. Brilliant people with good jobs, sharp minds, and zero patience. They can't resist fiddling with their portfolio. They churn themselves into poverty. Buffett and I built Berkshire Hathaway on patience, not brilliance, not speed. Just discipline to sit still when everyone else was running around like headless chickens. Take Coca-Cola. We didn't buy it because we thought it would double in a year. We bought it because we knew people would still be drinking Coke 50 years later. And they are. That's patience paying off. But patience isn't passive. It's active discipline. It means saying no 99 times out of 100. It means sitting on cash when you have nothing worthwhile to do. It means ignoring noise, hype, and CNBC experts shouting every 5 minutes. Try doing nothing for 10 years while the world screams at you to act. That's hard. That's why patience is rare. People confuse activity with progress. They'd rather be busy losing money than quietly compounding it. It makes them feel alive, and then it makes them broke. Here's a personal confession. If I had been a little more patient, I'd be twice as rich. Even after a lifetime of practicing it, I still underestimated how much compounding would do if left alone. So what chance do you think the average investor has when they're glued to their trading apps like gamblers at a slot machine? The best investment skill isn't picking stocks. It's learning to wait, to endure long stretches of boredom without doing something stupid. And boredom will come. Years of it. Markets will drift. Your portfolio will look like it's asleep. Meanwhile, your neighbor will brag about doubling his money in crypto or meme stocks. Smile politely and do nothing, because I guarantee you this. In 20 years, you'll still be standing. Have won't. Patience is the moat that protects you from self-destruction. It's not glamorous. It won't make for exciting dinner party stories, but it works. So rule number 3 is simple. Be patient, much more patient than you think. If you believe you can wait 5 years, prepare to wait 10. If you think 10, prepare for 20. That's how compounding actually works. And the sooner you accept that, the sooner you'll stop sabotaging yourself. Now, we've covered the 3 rules, but knowing them isn't enough. The real test is applying them consistently for a lifetime, which brings us to another topic: how stupidity, not brilliance, usually determines your results. Most people think success in investing comes from brilliance. That's wrong. It comes from avoiding stupidity. You don't need to be Einstein to make money. You just need to avoid being the village idiot. And in markets, there's never a shortage of idiots. I've met plenty. Some wore expensive suits. Some had PhDs. Some ran billion-dollar funds. But they all shared one fatal flaw. They thought they were too smart to fail. That arrogance is lethal. The truth is, it's easier to avoid stupidity than to chase brilliance. Brilliance is rare, unpredictable, and hard to copy. Stupidity is common, predictable, and easy to avoid if you have discipline. What does stupidity look like in investing? It looks like chasing fads. It looks like overconfidence in your own forecasts. It looks like ignoring risk as the upside feels exciting. It looks like buying something just because your neighbor bought it. I've done stupid things myself. Bought businesses I didn't understand. Ignored obvious risks because the story sounded good. It cost me millions. But I learned. And the lesson was simple. If you just avoid the obvious mistakes, the results take care of themselves. Let me give you a crude analogy. If you want to live a long life, you don't need to discover the fountain of youth. You just need to avoid dying young. Don't smoke 3 packs a day. Don't drive drunk. Don't play with rattlesnakes. That alone gives you a decent shot at old age. Investing works the same way. You don't need to discover the next Amazon at age 20. You just need to avoid leverage, speculation, and stupidity. Do that for 50 years, and compounding will make you rich. But people don't like this message. It's not sexy. It doesn't sell newsletters or get you on television. Nobody wants to hear, just avoid being dumb for 40 years. They want a formula. They want secret stock tips. They want the illusion of brilliance. Fine, let them. But brilliance is overrated. And more often than not, brilliance gets people in trouble. Think of long-term capital management. Some of the smartest mathematicians in finance, Nobel Prize winners, they blew themselves up spectacularly because they couldn't resist the lure of leverage and complexity. They thought they were immune to stupidity. Turns out they weren't. Meanwhile, Buffett and I stuck with candy, soda, insurance, railroads, boring businesses, nothing glamorous. But they didn't kill us. And over time, that made us rich. So here's the takeaway. Don't focus on being brilliant. Focus on not being stupid. If you see a hole in the road, don't fall in. If you don't understand something, don't touch it. If everyone around you is getting rich quick, step aside. You'll look dull in the short run, but you'll look like a genius in the long run. And that's the only time frame that matters. Next, I'll talk about a poison that kills more investors than bad luck or bad timing, envy. It's the dumbest sin of all, and it ruins otherwise smart people every single day. If you want to ruin your financial life, envy will do the job faster than anything else. It's the dumbest sin, not just because it makes you miserable, but because it makes you stupid. I've seen envy turn perfectly rational people into fools. They had good jobs, steady portfolios, secure futures. Then they looked at their neighbor or coworker getting rich faster, and suddenly steady wasn't good enough. That's how the trouble starts. Envy is why people chase bubbles. Tulips in Holland. .com stocks in the 90 seconds. Crypto coins in the 2010 seconds. The details change, but the psychology never does. Some guy you know brags about making a fortune overnight. You can't stand it. You feel left out, so you copy him right before the whole thing collapses. The funny part, your neighbor often loses it all too, but by the time that happens, you've already torched your savings. Envy makes you ignore logic. It makes you abandon patience. It pushes you into risks you'd never touch if you were thinking clearly. Buffett and I avoided envy by building a simple habit. We didn't care what other people were doing. We didn't care if some hedge fund guy was doubling his money in 6 months. We were content compounding at our own pace. And that's why we're still rich decades later while most of those hot hands disappeared. Think about it. Envy never helps you. If you win, it feels empty. If you lose, it feels terrible. There's no upside. It's like taking poison and hoping the other person dies. Yet, investors fall for it every day. They scroll through news headlines. They check social media. They measure their lives against strangers. And then they sabotage themselves by chasing returns they don't need. Here's the irony. The only way to beat envy is to define enough. Once you know what's enough, you stop caring who's richer or faster. But most people never do that. They're always chasing someone else's number. It's a race with no finish line. And that's a guaranteed way to stay miserable. When I look back, I don't regret the money I didn't make. I regret the mistakes I made trying to be clever. Envy played a role in some of those mistakes. It pushed me into things I shouldn't have touched. So my advice is blunt. Cut envy out of your system like a cancer. If your neighbor wins the lottery, congratulate him. But don't imitate him. Lotteries make winners look smart, but they don't make strategies worth copying. The real victory in investing is survival and compounding. That takes patience, discipline, and indifference to what others are doing. You won't look flashy. You won't win every cocktail party contest. But you'll have money when the envious crowd has none. And that, in the end, is all that matters. Next, we'll talk about something even more practical: how the Great Depression shaped my view of risk, survival, and money. Because when you've seen real poverty, you never forget it. I grew up in the Great Depression. That was my classroom. No textbooks, no theories, just the raw experience of watching people go broke. My father was a lawyer, a decent one, but the clients stopped paying when they lost their own livelihoods. Suddenly, the family that thought it was safe wasn't. I saw what happens when stability evaporates overnight. It left a mark on me. When you've lived through real scarcity, you don't forget it. You don't romanticize risk. You don't borrow recklessly. And you don't assume prosperity is permanent. Most people today have no memory of it. They think recessions are bad. They think a stock market crash is tragic. They have no idea what real collapse looks like. In the Depression, people sold furniture just to buy groceries. Men lined up for work they never got. Families lost farms that had been in their blood for generations. That kind of pain doesn't leave you. So when I later built wealth, I carried that memory with me. It wasn't about greed. It was about survival. I wanted to make sure my family never faced what mine once did. The Great Depression taught me 3 lessons that guided every investment decision I ever made. First, always prepare for the worst. Things can and will get ugly. If you're not ready for that, you'll be wiped out. That's why I hate debt. Debt is fine when the sun shines. It kills you when the storm hits. Second, cash is not trash. People today sneer at holding cash. They want every dollar working every moment. That's fine until the world breaks. Cash kept people alive in the Depression. It gave you options when others were desperate. It let you buy when everyone else was forced to sell. Third, humility keeps you alive. The Depression humbled everyone. Doctors, lawyers, bankers, farmers, it didn't matter. The system chewed them up all the same. If you think you're immune, history will prove you wrong. I carried those lessons into Berkshire. That's why we never bet the farm. That's why we always kept a margin of safety. And that's why we never felt pressure to chase every hot trend. You can survive bad times if you stay cautious. You can't survive arrogance. I watch younger investors today, and I see the same blindness I saw before past crashes. They think the party will never end. They think money will always be easy. They're dead wrong. The Depression made me paranoid in the right way. It taught me that risk is real, survival is everything, and comfort is fragile. Most of my wealth came later in life. But my attitude toward money was shaped early by watching families lose everything. It gave me discipline. And discipline is what separates investors who last from those who flame out. So here's the simple takeaway. If you invest as if the Great Depression could happen again, you'll probably survive anything. If you invest as if good times will last forever, you're already doomed. Next, we'll move from survival to partnership. Because no matter how cautious or disciplined you are, choosing the right people to work with makes all the difference. People love to romanticize my partnership with Warren Buffett. They imagine 2 geniuses plotting in some smoke-filled room pulling levers behind the financial curtain. The truth is far duller and far more useful. It worked because we were compatible where it mattered. We shared values, we shared discipline, and we shared the ability to say no to almost everything. That's not glamorous, but it's why Berkshire didn't blow up like so many others. And let me be blunt, most partnerships fail, not because the people are dumb, but because they can't stand each other, or because one of them wants the spotlight, or because they don't agree on what enough looks like. Warren and I avoided that nonsense. We didn't envy each other. We didn't compete for credit. We didn't keep score. We just tried to make rational decisions together. And when we disagreed, which happened plenty, we didn't turn it into drama. We argued. We listened. We went with a better idea. End of story. That's rare. Most people would rather be right than rich. We preferred being rich. Now, what didn't work? Well, for years we made mistakes by chasing cigar butt companies. Businesses so cheap you could pick them up, take one puff of value, then toss them away. Ben Graham's old method. We both followed it early on. It made us some money, sure, but it was small-time thinking. Owning crummy businesses, even at a bargain, is like marrying someone you don't like just because they're attractive today. It's going to be miserable in the long run. I pushed Warren to move past that, to pay a fair price for a great business instead of a bargain price for a terrible one. That shift buying See's Candies, then Coca-Cola, changed everything. That's what worked. Scaling up from cheap and ugly to quality and durable. And it took our combined stubbornness to hold that line for decades. Another thing that worked, trust. I never worried Warren would stab me in the back, and he never worried about me. You have no idea how much energy that saves over a lifetime. When you're not protecting yourself from your partner, you can focus on building wealth. People ask, Charlie, how do I find a Buffett? You don't. That's like asking, how do I find a spouse who never annoys me? The answer is, you get lucky. And you don't ruin it when you do. The real lesson isn't to find your own Buffett. It's to avoid the wrong partners. Crooks, egomaniacs, incompetents, they'll destroy you faster than any market crash. Our partnership wasn't about brilliance. It was about character, patience, and shared principles. We didn't need to talk every day. We didn't need to agree on everything. We just needed to stay rational and keep moving in the same direction. So what worked? Shared values, long horizons, mutual trust. What didn't? Our early obsession with cigar butts. It took years to grow out of that cheapness. But once we did, the compounding took care of the rest. Partnerships don't need to be perfect. They just need to avoid the dysfunctions that kill most of them. Next, I'll close with a few reflections. Not sentimental, just honest thoughts about overshooting wealth, survival, and why simplicity beats cleverness every single time. Here's the truth about getting rich. It's easier than people think and harder than they're willing to accept. Easier because the formula is simple. Spend less than you earn. Save. Invest in things you understand. Wait. That's it. No magic. No secret handshake. Just arithmetic and discipline. But it's harder because people can't do it. They won't spend less than they earn. They won't resist chasing fads. They won't wait. So they sabotage themselves over and over again. I didn't set out to be a billionaire. I set out to avoid being broke. I just overshot. Wealth is a byproduct of good habits, not a goal in itself. The goal is survival and independence. Money just piles up if you're patient enough. Most people can't stand that idea. They want a plan, a system, some clever trick. But cleverness is vastly overrated. Simplicity works better. The problem is, it's boring. Nobody wants to hear, buy a good business and sit on your ass for 30 years. But that's what actually works. People also underestimate how much time plays a role. The real money in investing comes late in life. Compounding is slow in the beginning, brutal in the middle, and miraculous at the end. But you don't get the miracle if you quit in the middle. And most people they change strategies, chase something new, panic at the wrong time. That's why they stay poor. Another truth, getting rich doesn't make you wise. It just makes you rich. Plenty of rich idiots out there, loud, confident, and miserable. Money doesn't fix character. It amplifies it. So if you're greedy, impatient, or envious, wealth will only magnify your flaws. That's why I talk more about avoiding stupidity than about chasing brilliance. Character trumps IQ in the long run. You want the surprising truth? Most people already know what they need to do. Spend less, save more, invest rationally, be patient. But they won't do it because discipline feels harder than dreaming. I'm not trying to inspire anyone. I'm just stating facts. If you can't live below your means, control your emotions, and sit still, nobody can help you. Not me, not Buffett, not God. That's the cruel simplicity of wealth. So if you want to be rich, stop asking for secrets. Stop looking for shortcuts. Start practicing patience and discipline every single day for decades. It's not glamorous, but it works. Next, I'll leave you with a closing reflection. Not a pep talk, just the blunt reality of what I've learned after nearly a century of watching people succeed and fail. Let me end with the most obvious rule of all. If you're not spending less than you earn, nobody can help you. Not me. Newt Warren. Not any financial guru selling books on the internet. You can't compound what doesn't exist. And you can't invest money that you already owe to someone else. Yet millions of people ignore this. They treat credit cards like free money. They lease cars they can't afford. They buy houses that own them, not the other way around. Then they wonder why investing feels impossible. It's not the market that's against them, it's their own behavior. The first step to wealth is brutally simple. Live below your means. Not for a month, not until the next promotion. For life. You don't need a six-figure income to get rich. You need discipline. I've seen modest earners build real wealth through decades of frugality and compounding. I've also seen high earners stay broke because they couldn't resist showing off. The world is full of people who look rich and stay poor, and a smaller number who look boring and end up wealthy. Take a guess which group you'd rather be in. We've covered a lot, understanding what you own, avoiding debt, practicing patience, steering clear of envy, remembering the depression, choosing the right partners. But it all circles back to one principle: don't sabotage yourself. Wealth is mostly about survival. Survival of your capital, survival of your discipline, survival of your sanity while everyone else loses theirs. The rules aren't complicated. The hard part is living by them when the world screams at you to do the opposite. That's why I've always said, avoid stupidity, keep your head, and don't get in your own way. It won't make you popular, but it will keep you solvent. And if you can manage that for a lifetime, you'll wake up one day and realize you've overshot. Not because you chased brilliance, but because you avoided disaster. That's the real secret to investing. So I'll leave you with this. If you're not spending less than you earn, I can't help you. Nobody can. The rest, patience, discipline, rationality is just details.